Tonight we'll be following the posted agenda. Tonight we have Public Works, and then we'll hear from Municipal Facilities. And under that category, we have 2 library projects and some others to discuss, and then we'll be discussing school facilities. So first on the list is Public Works. I see Director Christine Clancy here this evening, and her projects are numbered 9 through 15 on your project detail sheets. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm just going to flip to number 9. Sorry. So thank you. So this first request is for the schools. This is for DPW's sidewalks, number 9. And so we have 46.5 with our recent sidewalk master plan. We have 46.5 miles of sidewalk in town. Of that, about 27, or what we call is the primary sidewalks, getting us to the center, to schools. And so that's where we plow, following a storm. With that master plan that we've done, we've looked at ways to improve whether we were making repairs to the existing infrastructure and also providing connections between the existing network, particularly at the schools. So annually we do make this request. This supplements all the other funding that sometimes we do receive funding through grants. Right now we do have a federal grant for the Parkerville sidewalk, that we're a new sidewalk adjacent to the Byam School. Also, we have Chapter 90 funding, so that's supplemented with that goes to both our sidewalk and paving program. And also, just recently, free cash was awarded. Annually, the request has been about $350, $375 is now is the request that we're making. And like I said, so we also, in addition to the miles of sidewalk that we're repairing or that we're looking to repair, we have 920 curb ramps. Those are the pedestrian ramps at crosswalks in town. Of those, about 700 the town owns, the rest are the state. And then of that, I think 500 of the 700 need some type of update, whether it be a repair or it needs to be an ADA upgrade. So as we go through the paving program, we do look to see where we can touch those curb ramps throughout town. And then also, some of those funds go to that annually in addition to the sidewalks. As far as what I always get asked, what would this money go towards? And we do publish that list this coming, I would say this winter. We're close to looking at that list. Probably January it'll be posted. Next year is a little different than some other years because we have 2 really big sidewalk projects. One is the Parkerville sidewalk. It's a new sidewalk along Parkerville. That is a federally funded project that we have to go through a permitting. We're at a, probably I'd say, permitting level, so 60% design. We're ready to go to permitting. That's federally funded, but it does have to be some supplemental funding. That is from the Byam School all the way to the town line. Right now we have, I think it's $350,000 funded, but we do need to supplement that. So some of the funds of the pool of money that we have would go towards that project. We also have the Turnpike Road sidewalk project, and this has been talked about for some time, another section of new sidewalk from Golden Cove up to Warren Ave. We do have a Complete Streets project grant money, $500,000, that has to be spent by next year. It requires a bridge, essentially, because it has a culvert as part of the sidewalk. So that sidewalk is about $1 million. So again, we're looking to, so those are really 2 projects that we would focus some of these funds. We also look at the paving list to see what sidewalks within the paving list we would upgrade, existing sidewalks. Right now we're looking at Burton Lane. That's a roadway that was likely a candidate, and that would potentially be a sidewalk or a sidewalk repaired, in addition to the curb ramps that I mentioned. Do you want me to go? Is there any questions we can talk?
Sure, we can. Would you like to take questions
sure,
under each project?
Per project.
The committee members have any questions on the sidewalk project?
Is this enough for what you just said?
So I mean, as presented at the recent fall town meeting, we have a long list. So we have a $75 million backlog. So it was really never enough, and we're going to pick from that list to see what we. So I think as priorities is that we do have 8 years to do Parkerville from a funding perspective. We do want to try to do it next year, but we do have to get through permitting. So I guess that's a potential that could slide a little bit if we get into permitting. But our goal is to do that next year. So that's the target. Turnpike has to be spent by next year. So for that $500,000, that is a priority of ours. And we're looking at the paving list. So we have a $4.5 million paving list. It also depends on what prices come in right now. You know, the market, we run our estimates based off of the current market. That could go up, down. So we think it's enough, but if it's not, well, I guess the good thing with the paving program, you can always do more, and so we can always make adjustments. So I do think plus we just had the free cash, so we could always use more, but we know there's a lot of needs in town, so I think this is a fair request. All right. So with the, again, comparing annually with the sidewalk and paving program is is critical to the town. I think as far as questions that we receive at DPW, it's probably in the town manager's office, probably the most number of questions we receive are about the conditions of our roadways. Probably second to that are the sidewalks. We have about 190 miles of town accepted roads in town, and annually we try to do as much paving as possible. So in the past couple of years, we've done additional miles from, I think going back a few years, it was probably 6-7 miles a year. Now we're up close to 10 miles a year. And I think it is noticeable when you look around town. You see, there's roadways. A lot of the roadways are in fair condition, improved condition. Also, some of the Dunstable Road was done, North Road recently. So a lot of our arterial roads, Parkhurst this year. And we do a pavement. We maintain a pavement management database, and so we do have a whole algorithm rating system, and that rating does go up each year, and that's our goal is to try to keep that rating up. So like I said, we have a very long list of paving, easily a $4 million list, pulling from the Chapter 90, the grant opportunities, the free cash, and then we're looking at a request this year, $425,000. Again, that could always be more, but we know there's so many needs in town, so we do think this is a good target so that we can try to target close to that 10 miles of paving a year, compiled with all the other funding we receive. And one other thing to mention is this includes crack sealing, micro sealing, mill and overlay, and roadway reclamation. Any questions?
With 10 miles per year, does that get you on a cycle so that by the time you pave all of the roads, you're back to the one that you did 20 years ago or something like that? Is that the idea generally?
Yeah, I guess we're right now running that number to see how long it's going to take. I think not quite, because it is going to be hard to do 10 miles every year, because also I think some of those years they had supplemental funding. We just had free cash. Last year it was money provided by the state to pave Groton, so it's going to be hard to do 10 miles every year. Plus we're getting into spending more on roadway reclamation, less on the milling. And that cost more per a mile or a foot. So I think it's putting us in a better position. But I guess we're still running that number, because if a road lasts 20, 30 years, we have to verify that still. So we're still updating it, I would say. But yes, it puts us in a much better position.
Well, am I to assume that you need free cash in order to do the 10 miles?
That's how it has. Yeah. So if we have free cash annually, then the 10-mile number is a 10 mile a year. That works out great. But I just don't think we'll be able to sustain that.
The question becomes, if you don't get free cash, what do you end up with?
Less miles. Yeah.
Well, I got that. I managed to get that one.
What we are trying to do, though, is I would say the past couple of years we have, with our algorithm, we have looked to see, well, how do we catch a road before it becomes a more expensive repair? Or how do we stretch that dollar? How do we stretch it? So micro sealing, I think we just started that 2 years ago. It's essentially when you driveway seal put a driveway seal, it has a little more of a thickness to it, and that's supposed to extend the paving life by 5 years. So we just placed that. So far it's held up for 2 winters on some streets and 1 winter for the other. So we're trying to extend that dollar. So if we can look at that, then I guess that's part of the answer too.
Well, the reason I asked it was simply I want to make sure you get what you need.
And the other thing that was Chapter 90. So from the state's perspective is like we're going back on over 10 years where they've given us the same amount of funding too. So we always, like I said, there's just so many needs, so it's hard to balance all the needs. So to pave a couple more miles and not do a bridge or a culvert, it's hard. I guess it depends on a year-to-year basis what the need is.
My last question, and I'll leave you alone, is I just see 425, 425, 425. I guess the cost is never going to go up every year?
No, so 450, we're targeting FY23. So we'll look at this. Right now, we're showing this. I mean, like I said, we always can use more. The fact that we've been able to do 10 miles a year, I think, put us in a good position. So I think that's why we just know we have so many needs with all the other capital requests. So I was reluctant to bump it up. But then when you start to look at FY 2030, you start to bump it up.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think
All right. Moving on to the next DPW request, we're moving into some equipment. So we do have a fleet management software database that we're using, and we look to see annually what equipment we need to replace. I meet annually with the division heads, and particularly our mechanics, and be like, what is the piece of equipment that you're spending the most time on maintaining? Because some of these repairs are very costly. This was a request for last year, but we had a lot of requests last year. This is a mini excavator. It's a 2013 Caterpillar 305.5 mini excavator. And it's a track machine, so it has about 3,800 hours. Essentially, given the age of it, it is starting to get into more needed repairs. This would be used this is mostly for, I guess, outside of plowing season. It's more for when we're doing trenching, we do demolition, I call these the highway mini projects, or they're not so mini, they assist them. They did work at Coolest Farm. They've done demo of McCarthy Courts, the tenant. So these machines are on all those projects. So we do see this as a need. Any questions?
What would you do with the old machine once it's replaced?
So this one we probably would. So a lot of these machines we do check to see if we want to retain it, just to get us through like another year or two if we need it as a backup for any reason or something. But a lot of these machines we typically put on municipal. Sometimes too, if stormwater doesn't have something, we'll or vice versa, we'll kind of pass equipment between departments. But this one we might put on municipal just to try, and that money goes then to the general fund.
And for those that may not be familiar, that's an online auction platform that allows, so a town is able to get a higher recovery value than versus the old days, holding a live auction, you may only get a few bidders, so.
Is there a lead time on this?
This is more of a so when I talk about some of these vehicles, we're not going to be getting for another 18 months, but this is, I don't know if it's a month or 3 months, but I believe it's more of a available item. All right. So the next request is a DPW highway request, and this is a heavy-duty truck 10-wheeler with sander body. The existing vehicle is a 2011 heavy-duty truck. It has a sander body and dump body, so we do use the sander in the winter and the dump body the rest of the year. It is also, I guess the reason why it's so critical is really for the snow and ice operations. Again, we use it all year, but a lot of these requests, that the way we prioritize them is with the need for snow and ice, because that really is our emergency operations. This existing truck has 35,000 miles on it. It's 2011, and it's getting to the point where it has more repairs, but also these vehicles start to rust out, and so when they start to rust out, you really can't do those repairs. So when we start to see the body rusting out and you cannot be repaired, we put that in line to need to be replaced. So again, this would likely go to a municipal bid. Someone might be able to use it. This vehicle, actually, when we sat down and looked at this need, first I had listed a 6-wheeler, just because thinking, well, maybe we can get a smaller vehicle, and there was only like a $15,000 difference for a new 6-wheeler and a 10-wheeler. So I said, well, let's go with the 10-wheeler, potentially more use. And this vehicle is going to probably take 18 months, maybe 2 years to receive. So if they're approved, we would make the purchase in July, and hopefully we probably won't see even next winter, probably the following winter. So that's why we're starting to see rust now and deterioration now, but we need it in 2 years, or hopefully, less would even be better. Any questions? All right, so this next machine, I believe when we talk about priorities, this is one of the highest equipment priorities that I had. This is a 2003 sidewalk snow clearing machine, but has just under 10,000 hours of service. These are critical because these are used to clear the sidewalks. When we clear the sidewalks, we want to clear them to, these blades are just enough to get on it's not like we're just using a snow blower and doing a couple feet. We want to clear the full sidewalk width, so these are 5-foot blades, and they're made to fit right on the sidewalk. The ones that we have are only used for the snow clearing. These machines that we have can't be used for any other purposes in the year. But they are so super critical because we need to clear the sidewalks. Our focus is the streets in the parking lots, but then immediately after that, or concurrent, we're trying to jump onto the sidewalks, especially adjacent to the schools, to get the schools back in session. We have 27 miles of sidewalk, but we're now building out the network. We're trying to add to it. These machines too, though I think highway mechanic has many words on how to describe this machine, but it's it's very. I mean, one repair costs $24,000. So substantial repairs, and thing is when you have feet of snow and you're moving that snow, you don't know what you're going to be hitting. So they hit all sorts of things in the sidewalk, and when they do that, that's what takes the machine down. The machine gets down, someone has to come out, rescue it, bring it back to the shop. That machine is down for then 2 or 3. It's not just like get it back out usually. It's usually down for 2 weeks. And so unfortunately, when these are down, they're down in the winter. So when we sat down to look again at updating our 5-year plan, we said we need to upgrade our new machines. These machines, they're hopefully there's new technology. This isn't a 20-year-old machine. So we've looked into the machines, and we have some pricing. Also, the new machines potentially have some different attachment opportunities, so we could potentially have some use of brush cutting. We're looking into the stump grinding, various uses, but there's more versatility in the new equipment as well. So this was one of our higher requests, just because when it is down, it's somewhat detrimental. Any questions?
What would you do with the old ones?
So we did talk about this one. We probably would, it still works. We probably just keep it because we have other machines, and if they go down, we'll keep it. Still works, so we'll keep it as a backup. But as soon as we start, I have a request for next year. Honestly, when we talked about it, we said, can we put in a request for a couple more? We just know we have so many requests. So we would keep this one for another year or so, and then hopefully we would ask for another one next year. And then as we have a couple, we would then start to municipal them, put them on municipal.
That's a good question, because I also was going to ask Christine, what about with all the improvements with the additional sidewalks you put in through town? I didn't know if that would cause a need to get more equipment like this.
So I think it's something we have to look at. So as we add sidewalks, the question is how do we right now, if we have a significant storm, it can take us 4 days to get through all the sidewalks. And so it's not as much of how many pieces of equipment, it's also people too. And it's hard, and you have to have enough. If you've been on the road for so many hours, you have to give them a break. So it is a resource question, and I know there's also some towns have bylaws maintaining your sidewalk. I mean, that would have to be a whole bylaw. But yeah, potentially if we add sidewalk, somewhere resources have to be added, or it's going to take us longer to clear the sidewalks. And we're 27 miles, we're already there. It takes us, we say 4 days, sometimes we can get it done in a couple days. It depends what type of snow it is, if we hit anything with the machine, but we target a couple days, but we say it takes 4 days on a typical larger storm.
How many machines are there?
We have 4, but we almost always have one down.
That was my next question.
I think last year at one point we had 2 down.
So before we go on to the next project, I just wanted to explain that the next project is number 14. So I just want to explain that Director Clancy and I spoke after the last meeting, and Public Works actually owns 2 Chevy Colorados. So there's a 2010 and a 2012. So that's why I sent you that new project detail sheet. So please substitute the one that I sent you and in your packet, and it should be a 2010 Chevy Colorado for facilities. and not engineering, so.
Correct, yeah. Well, that is a need. I think this is a larger need. So this is the 2010 Chevy Colorado truck as a facilities vehicle. This typically in the summer is used more because we have seasonal help. So this is an important truck to help with maintenance of our parks. Or other, facilities in the summer. The mileage is 88,000 miles. This was brought to my attention by our lead mechanic just because he said, again, it's rusting and we're getting to a point where it might fail inspection. And once it fails inspection, then it really has no use to us, especially if we know the repair is so costly. And so, yes, as repairs are cost prohibitive. So with that, we also, though, we see a need that as we replace our vehicles, it's important to get vehicles, to have vehicles that we can put plows on. And so the proposal would be to get something to put a plow on, another 3/4 truck, or sorry, 1-ton truck potentially, and that's what it's priced out as, is to have something to put a plow on it. Potentially getting that for next winter, because this going into funding request for FY26. We are still looking for plow drivers, and we're down pieces of equipment. So we're just as much vehicles in-house as we can. We're going to try to replace with vehicles so we have plows in-house, or expansion of that. So this is also a critical request for the facilities department and for the needs of snow and ice operations. Similar to the next request, this is also facilities. This is actually, so Steve Callahan uses this a lot. This is the 2008 Ford Ranger. Has about 100,000 miles on it. This is similar to the previous request where the body is deteriorating at a rate where it potentially won't pass an inspection. And when we replace this, we would also propose to replace it with a plow on it. Any questions?
And when we go to municipal facilities, would you like to start with the library projects?
Yeah,
and
we
then-
can do that. That's fine.
Well, I'm just going backwards. I just wanted to mention for those that may be viewing the meeting at home, in recent years, it's been our practice to display the project detail information on the screen. Unfortunately, there's a power interruption just before tonight's meeting, so we are unable to display those. But if anyone's watching or any residents interested, just email me at jsousa@chelmsfordma.gov, and I will be glad to email you a PDF packet of all that information. All right, so we're going to go back to Project 3, which is the Adams Library parking lot. And also with us is Library Director Leslie Kimball. She has some photos and information to distribute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, I'll start it, and Leslie, I think also has a great understanding of these needs, so she'll fill in as well. But the first request is the Adams Library Parking Lot Rehabilitation Project. I know this was discussed last year as well. We did move forward with the wall work, and which came out great. We essentially abandoned that sidewalk adjacent to the library because it really had nowhere to go leading to, and there was a safety concern there because people were driving off of the retaining wall. So we've adjusted that slope, added a fence, put curbing in the back of that parking lot. But the rest of the parking lot does need to be repaired. And also, if you look at in some of the pictures I think are shown, the access points to the main library have concrete curbing with some rebar in it, and that curbing is failing. And we've received, I know I've received a few complaints, you've received complaints pretty frequently. We go out and we try to do patches, but really they need to be replaced. So we do address any type of tripping hazards, but there's Band-Aids and long-term solutions to replace. The proposal is to replace all the concrete curbing with granite curbing, and that should really last many, many years. Also replacing the sidewalk. And then the parking lot itself is deteriorated. The DPW is right now looking at all town parking lots, similar to the roadway pavement management system. We're creating a rating system for all the parking lots and saying, okay, how do we rank all of our parking lots in town? And I would say this, and also I know the police was before you, those are the two really the needs right now. We do have a little bit of money left over in the previous project, the wall project. I did, with some of that would be for plantings, but also some of that I think could still go to some of the curbing. So the request is the 390, and that would make this project whole. We would do all the design in-house, and we could potentially do that project next summer. With that, looking at ADA accessibility, making sure that's maintained, regrading the area. Also, separately, I know we have 6 charging stations proposed to go in at the library, so we would look to have that work done first, and because there's probably some trenching there, and then we would come in and do this work after. And this project, the parking lot restoration is a mill and overlay, so we take out the top 2 inches, adjust the structures, and like I said, all new curbing and new sidewalk. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
For a little bit of context, number one, this would have been probably an even bigger emergency if we didn't have DPW and Highway helping us patch this stuff up over the years. I mean, for us, this project, originally started getting talked about in as far back as 2016, but then much more seriously around 2021, when Gary Persichetti was here and had really said that he thought this project should be happening in FY24 because of the safety issues and the deterioration of it. We know problems only get worse over time, so things haven't gotten better since then. As I think I've talked about before, we have 165,000 library visitors a year, and even if I'm really conservative and say that, every car has 4 people in it, we're talking about 40,000 cars passing through and parking in this lot. We're open 3,000 hours a year, so we have people parking there both in daylight and in the dark. So when you have, potentially some lighting challenges as well, it's just really, really hard to even see where the dangerous spots are. So as Christine said, the deterioration and repair, we're talking about lots of costs at this point with those annual or sometimes more than annual patching and repairs. The crumbling curbs, as you can see in the picture, at this point, there's not much patching that can be done because there's nothing for the patching to hold on to before it crumbles. That exposed rebar in different places has had to actually be cut off before patching can happen because of damage to cars and tires. DPW repainted a bunch of lines this year, which was terrific and really helped you see how important that piece is, but there's still lots of directional arrows and things like that that need to be fixed. The curb visibility, because that paint doesn't last there. We have definitely, a major population of people who are mobility impaired, maybe visually impaired, and these things are all essential for people to be able to safely navigate the parking lot, never mind navigating the cars that are going in the wrong direction, which really doesn't help. We have had, just in the last, I went back about maybe 5 or 6 years, and we have many, many incident reports of people either tripping or falling, cars, fender benders, all kinds of things that are happening that you can just see are because of the design of the parking lot or because of where people are walking and the deterioration of things. So it definitely seems to us that we are, past the point from a cost effectiveness standpoint of getting this done so that we aren't continuing to put money into something that there's just no way to keep up with it at this point.
Any questions for either
I had
Christine?
a couple of questions. One is, I didn't know if you knew the outlook, if it's gonna change the number of spaces, and when you look to do the new parking lot. And then the other part of the question is, I think you said you're looking to add more charging stations as well?
So-
And is there subsidies to whoever's gonna put them in there?
Sure. So we received a grant, I think it's $2.2 million grant to add fast charging stations around town, and the library being one of them. We have I think 2 ports, one right now. We potentially would relocate that one. I guess you could keep it there too, but potentially I'm looking into the feasibility of relocating that to McKay, and then he'd have 6 there. So it's actually coming in at no cost to the town. We would just have to pay for the electricity, and then any software or any repairs post the warranty. So as far as number of parking spaces, we haven't gotten into that quite yet. Potentially, I know that there was one spot when you first pulled in that I think when we restriped it, I think we were able to even add 1 spot back. So potentially, but I mean, knowing the site, I don't know if you're not going to see significant. I mean, I'm talking probably 1 or 2, and we want to look at the flow too and make sure that it's just flow. So I think our goal is not to necessarily add spaces, just to make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, in 2019, there was a conceptual drawing put together of the parking lot and the wetlands kind of together. So agreed, I think the main hope was to maximize parking in whatever way possible, but to really improve traffic flow, safety, so that it makes sense. I didn't bring you pictures of the signs, but there's signs everywhere, you can tell, because people, they don't know which way to go. So you end up with 5 stop signs and 6 one-way signs. So the hope would be, it's true, the hope would be that with a design, it would become much more instinctive for people to move through there, including pedestrians. If you're at that far part of the lot and you're looking at the main door, it's not only not clear where you should be walking, it's very unclear to cars that somebody could be crossing there.
Yeah, the other thing was, I didn't know if you had other opportunities to totally kind of shift the design between the front and the side to have, I don't know, even if it's just a picnic table area for reading outside, or if there's any opportunity to make it more inviting. But definitely safe is good.
Yeah, safe is very good. That is our number 1 priority. We do have the Greenway, the Scaboria Greenway, which so much work and a wonderful donation went into. In any ways, we're talking with the retaining slope that DPW did, which came out so beautiful, and the mums this fall were great. Looking at overall the planting plan for that, but also looking at the entire property. How do we tie together the green space that is there? How do we tie together all of our outdoor spaces? We use the outdoors so much more for programming now than we did before the pandemic. So that's definitely needs to be a part of this plan, to make that outdoor programming really safe as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a more strategic question, and I don't want to get stoned tonight when I ask it. But how many towns have 2 libraries?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. We do have towns in Massachusetts that have, branch libraries, and I think we're really fortunate to have a branch library in North Chelmsford. It's a wonderful community neighborhood.
Yeah, I have no issue with the parking lot. I really don't. I don't want you to think that's where I'm coming from, but I'm on the finance committee, and I just, two buildings means 2 roofs, means 2 parking lots, means 2 air conditioners, means additional cost to the town. And we already got other problems regarding funding and et cetera, and you just look for, as we look down the road, when things get tough, what are we going to do?
That's why you're there, you're doing your job. You're
Yeah.
looking at everything and prioritizing. That's exactly what I think any of us would expect.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
On the parking lot, last week Chief Spence mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, I
so
wanted to mention that too.
I did
So-
speak with Christine. She has an answer on that for
Yes,
us.
and so, I mean, it's hard to know the exact savings, but there's an economy of scales when you start to get over 1,000 tons, and the two projects put you over 1,000 tons. So there's likely a cost savings in the purchase of asphalt. It could be more than, what I would say, but I think as a safe estimate is if you take $50,000 off the request in totality, so you could say $25,000 each request. It could be less. It's just, I guess we're reluctant to adjust it more so because the market depends on the market. If gas price, because it's related to fuel too. But I think $50,000 off of so if we put both projects out together, we would still design them as we had planned both of them, but have one package go out, one bidder, and then that way they potentially would, because when they go to the plant, there's a quantity that they try to hit, and they could potentially pay both at the same time.
So just to clarify, to make sure I understand, for the purposes of our evaluation, if we were to include both of those projects, we could then subtract 50,000 from that as we calculate our,
In totality,
Right.
yeah.
So, and what I'll do when I send out the worksheet for all the committee members to make their decisions for the next meeting on December 5th, I'll put a reminder in there and I'll reduce each project by 25,000 in cost, and it will be assuming that
Both.
a majority vote for both projects, just to make it clear.
yeah, that's great.
Yep.
All right, any other questions on the parking lot? No. All right, so the next library request is the HVAC replacement, and we were talking about this last year. We do have some capital and also I know some ARPA funds to move forward with that design study. Right now we're doing the study and then do the design. The existing HVAC system has, it's aged. It's over 20 years old. We have had many problems in the past. We had to do many resets, we have our own, fortunately, our own HVAC technician. I think he's done some ways to reset it, but we've also had to bring in outside vendors to troubleshoot. And it unfortunately is during times of, when when the AC is needed, or when, I don't think it's been more focused around AC, but still it is, and also I think the design of the system, one thing we want to look as part of that design is what is the best system, just because a lot of the units are up in the ceiling, are hard to access, so the study is looking at all what potential options exist. We are still going through that study, so it's hard for me to say right now what that total dollar value is, but we know that it's substantial. So we asked for $450,000 last year. We're also doing this. So we have about $30,000 in ARPA that we're working on right now for that study to kind of scope out the project. And then knowing that we have a need, looking to fund the next phase, I guess it's a phase or a balance. I can't say it's the remaining balance because it's such a large undertaking, but it would help advance that project. As Lizzie said, there's so many people that use the library, so it is a need. And a lot of our buildings are this. I mean, this is one of our newer buildings, but you're starting to see a lot of the same, roofs, boilers, HVAC systems need to be replaced right around now. A couple other notes. So 3 air handler units were failing at least once a day, requiring manual resets. This is going back to 2023. And then last year, the compressor failed, requiring manual resets. We were able to service that, but still, we've serviced it. But at this point, we know the system's old and it needs to be replaced. Any questions? Anything to add?
We have 160,000 people who come to the library every year. I think Christine has summed it up really well. Our concern is that, if we're not positioned to be able to move ahead with a project, we're going to end up in a complete failure. The library is, given how many hours we're open. Every week, we are a cooling and warming center for the community. That is definitely something that we see people using. There is also the value of our collections in the building, and HVAC also manages humidity, and humidity and books do not get along. So, we're talking about, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of materials that have been purchased with town operating money, and we certainly don't want to see those materials become unusable for that reason. We certainly have seen, the system, the manufacture date on the units themselves is 1998. And when a technician from Carrier, who's the manufacturer, came out in 23, because of all the problems we were having, and diagnostics wasn't really, people just couldn't figure, they're like, no, it's old, but we don't understand why it's not working. So Carrier sent out a technician representative who went through the entire system and basically said the same thing. The reason why you're having so many problems is because the entire system is so old. We can't find one component that needs to be fixed. It's across the board. And that, given that components and parts are getting harder and harder to find for a system that's this old, that as you replace larger parts of it, you're gonna find yourself in a position where the refrigerant and the oil, because they aren't EPA compliant at this point, won't actually fit with new components. And then if you're talking about, oh, now we have to replace an entire third of it, and we've got a third running on the old fluids and 2/3 running on the new, that just from a cost perspective and management perspective of the building, that it just doesn't make sense not to make it happen. And I think, we just want to be positioned that when, Christine and her crew gets everything in place and we know it's a good energy efficient system, that we'll be able to move ahead with that, especially since we know there are lead times with this as well.
Yeah, a lot of the units, we know right now, going through some of the ARPA projects, lead times on these units, several weeks or in some cases a half a year. So obviously lead times change, but knowing that, it's a project that's not going to be done immediately. It's going to take time to phase or to procure the equipment.
And Christine, you touched on this earlier in your presentation, but I just wanted to make sure that the committee understood that because this, as you were explaining to me when we were talking about this project, because it hasn't been spec'd out, we haven't been able to, it's not, the design has not been spec'd out to a level of detail yet. You may need additional funding to complete this project, so we're just not at that
Yes,
stage.
yeah, I mean, yes, so we've, it's hard to estimate, you can't just look up what's the cost of HVAC system, it depends, it's so particular to the building, and this system is unique in the layout, so it is something we're now going through the study in that costing, looking at options, and then I think by the spring, we'll have a good understanding of what that timeline is, and so, but, with $450,000 we already have, and then an additional $450,000, that should put us in a good position to potentially phase it, or I guess at that point we'll know what percentage we can begin, and then looking at that balance. I imagine there would be, I can't put a number on it, it's really difficult to, and it's important to have that study, which we're right now going through.
So in 2015, the Board of Trustees actually, and Kathleen Canavan brought in a consulting firm, design firm, and that proposal that came through at that time, 2015, was $750,000 to $1 million. So it's probably going to be.
Yeah, so that being 10 years old, you can imagine that price is likely over $1 million. I just don't know if it's 1.2, is it 1.5, is it 2, and so it's hard with that. I think it's fair to ask for another balance and see what we can move forward more immediately in phase.
Why would we borrow the money before we know what the total cost of the project's gonna be?
Well, I guess that is an option too, is not borrow, but I guess we're moving forward with the study and analysis, and so by the spring, we would hopefully know the project, and so before the following spring, potentially installing some of the project, we might be phasing the project. So I guess we know it's at least this, we're not asking for too much, so potentially phasing, and because, I guess this is different in that typically it's hard to ask for the money without knowing exact phase, but this is such a critical project, because of being a heating and cooling.
And I think the hope is to, from a capital planning standpoint, to be able to spread out the kind of the savings for it, it'd be very difficult to come and look for $2 million in 1 year if we are able to do some phasing.
Well, that's what it's gonna cost the town. Whether we spread it or don't spread it, it's gonna cost us. Plus, we're gonna pay interest if we borrow money before we need it.
No, but what we're trying to do is like, if, for example, if, what the phasing, they can get the project started, but also too, recognizing that capital funds are limited, if we devoted $1 million, or I'm just taking numbers as an example, $1 million, it's a huge chunk of the money that we have available to a lot. So if we devote, $1.5 million, or what, we don't have the exact number, it's gonna take a significant amount of the capital plan, and it would leave less money available for other departments' needs.
Yeah, looking at the next year, we do have, or next, 5 years, we have a lot of requests coming that
Well, I can
are,
argue that the opposite way, okay? Which simply says that you create, if you've borrowed half, then you're gonna have to spend the other half in the coming year, which may impede you doing something else in that year, okay? Because, you shouldn't, why borrow before you know what what and when?
But it's separate, it's separate sections of the building, David. That's what you need to understand is, it's not like it's a house where you've got an HVAC system that's cooling your entire house. You've got the original building, which, that wing has an area, and then you've got the addition part. And so the bottom line is what they're saying is they're phasing sections of the building over time as opposed to doing it. So it's not like it's one project and you're funding half of it. What we're doing is we're phasing sections of the building so that it's all done, but that we can make progress. Because otherwise, the request is what you suggest, you come in for an aggregate amount for the entire building, which would be burdensome in terms of the capital request for any given year. So what's going to happen is they're going to do this in phases as we move through the building. And the building of that structure and configuration, that makes sense. And very similar to what we did with the McCarthy roof, and we're gonna have to do with some of these roofs. You're not gonna be able to fund the entire McCarthy roof, a school of that big, at one time, just like we did with the high school parking lot. We did the high school parking lot in sections. We did the rear of the building, and then we came back at a later time and did the front of the building. It's just the approach the town has taken for projects of this enormity, in order to basically provide progress, but also simultaneously allow other areas to be addressed. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's just how we've gone about it, recognizing the scope of some of these massive projects over time.
And Paul, I'm not saying it's right or wrong either. All I'm saying is that if you spend half now, it's a given you're gonna spend the other half.
Yes.
Okay, so it's already out there in the out years now, and that then bucks up against what other projects in that year might be important and might make it more difficult. That's all I'm saying.
But we've done that with roadways,
Yeah,
sidewalks, all these things, but that's the only way we're able to make progress through these type of economies that we're facing. And you're right, I agree, it's not right or wrong, it's the only way to address areas of concern.
I got it.
I actually appreciate the debate in the sense of, now I get a better understanding of your approach to the project, because when we reviewed this last year, it came, the concern was what the addition caused and where the events and where the work was, crawling into the spaces to fix it. So I would assume, and I'm sure you're addressing it with the amount of servicing that is, you're probably gonna do that half first, but if you could speak to how you're prioritizing each half, just.
so the study will, I guess, speak
Okay.
to, so there's with the 3 air handling units and the compressor, so I assume that we would replace the compressor, we know, and then would we target one of the 3, but also we have to look at the whole design to see how do we provide the HVAC, how do we heat and provide ventilation and cooling to specific spaces, so it might change depending on the design. But I see it potentially being in 2 or 3 phases because of how it's currently set up. I I think because this is such, used by 165,000 people a year, we aren't going to be able to shut down the library. So we're going to I feel like it's a phased approach anyway. So yeah, I guess we're still in the study phase. So, but my guess is it's 2 to 3 phases, given that we have the 3 air handling units and we have the compressor out. The compressor would probably be one of the first pieces.
And I guess just like how we're saving money, if we can, do both parking lots at the same time to save that money, I would suggest too, I don't know if we can negotiate to make sure that the person that gets the money, if we can delay their project but guarantee them the contract for the following year to save money, just something to look at to make sure we're getting best cost too.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to have the funds, and that's why I guess we're asking for the additional 450, because we can only procure against what we have. So if we only have 450 and not $900,000, and let's say, I'm just making this up, let's say it's a $1.5 million project, we're gonna have to phase it for the 900. I guess we can't procure more. So that's why we're asking for the 450, or plus, in addition to the 450.
I imagine too, like we talked about for some of the specialty vehicles, this equipment is gonna need to be ordered in advance and is gonna have lead times. I don't remember what it was for McKay. It was
Yes, well, that
40 weeks
that
or
was
something?
still, I think, from coming from the COVID. But we did with the senior center. We had we just got everything in, but we were originally targeting in this as a summer project. It ended up being a fall project, so we're still seeing those seasonal delays. It depends exactly on the product. But I would say, yeah, we can't do the project, procure it, and say this unit's going to be available in 2 weeks. It does take time.
All right, so it looks like that's all the questions for Christine on that one. So that puts us back at Project 16, which is the ADA accessibility for parks, playgrounds, and open spaces.
Sure, and I did have a picture, and for some reason it just didn't, but the picture was, I think you all have seen the open space and recreational survey that went out this spring and summer. So that's a plan that we're developing right now. A draft is being developed. And with that survey, we're required to have a updated open space plan, every 7 years, so we're going through that process. With that plan has, implementation and a lot of how do we execute the update. And so action items coming out of that plan is provide some ADA accessibility enhancements, or existing. It's either provide new ADA accessible amenities or potentially upgrade what we currently have that needs to be fixed in our open spaces, which includes our parks and playgrounds. We are still drafting that plan, so I don't have specific projects in mind, but we know there's a lot. We have, I think if you look at all of our playgrounds, we do strive to make ADA accessibility one of our top priorities. But there's always more we can do, or repairs. There's also some spaces that, from this plan that we're putting together, we see that we can add some ADA accessible trails, or certain, I know soccer fields, walking down to the soccer fields with an ADA accessible path that's come up. So with that long list, we'll have a long list of plans. Some items will be easy to do, some things will become projects. So looking at that list, we want to start implementation and just asking for $150,000 a year, which should be able to hopefully target whether it be a big project or maybe it's several small projects. My guess is that there's going to be such a big request that we're going to try to target some of the smaller just initially. I do propose this as annually, but we'll look at this. We'll have this. We're right now putting this list together. We'll be able to cost it out and then update this 5-year plan.
Any questions on that project?
All right. The next one is the number 17, the town offices bathroom improvements. I call it phase 1. So we do have ARPA funds that we're going through right now. Actually, we're awarding the RFP. We're awarding the RFP the next couple weeks, within the next month, to do a complete study and design of all the bathrooms in this building. These bathrooms are from the 80s, do not have low flow fixtures. There have been a lot of repairs. We actually did do, as part of our sewer project, we did a smoke testing in parts of the town, and it included town offices. And I will say, when we did this building, there was one spot where we got some smoke, and that was in the bathrooms, which shows you that the piping infrastructure needs to be updated. With that, we're doing the design right now. With that design will come a proposed overall cost estimate, and so, with there being 6 bathrooms, $180,000 might be a little low, but I do think we can try to tackle 2 to 4 bathrooms with that. That design would be completed this spring, and then we would likely advance to this construction phase next summer or fall. And I think it also, the fact that we're upgrading to, and with that, we would look at ADA accessibility. So just making sure that we're providing compliant bathrooms, high efficiency fixtures, and all the other plumbing updates. The proposal or the limits of the work are contained to the building itself. So, or the room itself, we're not proposing to do plumbing throughout the building. It is an older building, but just within the bathrooms themselves. And this has come up a lot, I think, and it's always, there's been other priorities, but with the design being advanced, it is becoming a larger priority. It's something that seems more achievable.
I will say that as someone that, works in the building every day, we do receive a lot of, if you talk to any department head or employee, we often get comments from residents sometimes about several that, some of the fixtures work, but the bathrooms are antiquated where it's an older building.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I think that wraps up. We have any questions for Director Clancy on the restrooms? Okay. And so that wraps up municipal facilities, and then we're transition to school facilities. So we have Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Jay Lang, and also I know Director Clancy, they may be co-presenting some of
we'll co-present.
Yeah, co-presenting.
I guess I can, we're on number 19, or did I jump?
Number 18, I think. So I did want to mention, Project 18 deals with school security.
Oh, yes.
And
You
the
start
reason
that.
it's numbered 18A through F is the school security project involves multiple locations. And that's the reason for that. Good evening, Dr. Lang.
Hi, how are you guys? Thank you for having us. And yeah, Christine and I will kind of tag team tonight.
Better move your mic back, you keep hitting them with your papers.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes, you're you, man.
Thank you for your help.
We're good now.
So,
You mean I wasn't loud enough?
You allowed it with that, but it's all good.
no apologies necessary. So the first project before you this evening is school safety related. And as you know, on the desk tonight, I had given John, and I know he passed out to you, some updated prioritization list from the school committee. Just to kind of recap real quickly, so the school committee keeps a rolling 5 and 10 year, oh, now I'm doing it, 5 and 10 year capital project list. And we've done a very good job working with folks over the last number of years, keeping up on our projects. We obviously, on our list, had 2 projects that we were able to kind of move that would have been before you this evening. The first was the McCarthy tennis courts. That had been a project that had been deferred for a couple of years. We were able to use, with Paul's assistance, some free cash at the end of the year, and town meeting was very supportive of that. So that's going to be in the works. And then the second one was the South Row roof. We got very good news that did get invited into the MSBA Accelerated Repair Project. So we'll be getting about half of that project back, but that's going to take a little bit of time to develop. So those are $2 million about in items that came off the table. Obviously, the running list is very long, and the school committee, having kind of gone through this for a couple of times, we all realize the limited capacity we have for funding. So we said, let's actually just come forward with the projects for this year that are really kind of most important to us. So you'll see them kind of tiered in the green, the school safety and security type items, and then there are 4 more building capital items below it. There's obviously a list that adds up to a lot more behind that, but we've kind of chosen to defer those to other years, or even internally, if we have some extra money during the budgeting cycle, sometimes we'll fund some of the smaller projects, so we'll continue to do that. But the school safety and security ones at the high school and now McCarthy, this past summer you funded the security, we call it kind of a vestibule. It's a secure entryway to the school. There's a little picture in the board, but they actually really came out very nice. It's been very functional for us. We were able to use the costing from this past summer's project because of the bidding and whatnot to generate the project costs for going forward. So we now have kind of a secure entryway at the high school and McCarthy, and we'd like to replicate that at the remaining four elementary schools and the other middle school. It's going to take us a little bit longer we will incorporate chips at some point in time over at ComEd. The design is just far, far different than these other schools, and we didn't want to hold up the work on these particular schools. But we would also like to be able to construct kind of a secure entry in those buildings. You'll notice that there's two different price costs on these schools. It really just has to do with the layout of the buildings. So if you walk into Center and South Row, there's just a little bit less construction cost. There are already walls you're kind of walking in. You only need to construct a single wall with a door and the secure entry. At the other schools, you really need to construct two, so you have to kind of build an L. So there's just more costs when we were doing the projections on that. But that would include the build out of the spaces, the tie-in to the security system, the swiping system, the visitor entry system, management system. So those are before you to be able to round out the schools. I am anticipating the question will come up because we've talked a little bit internally too. Parker, we typically have been deferring all the capital items on that because we know we're going to be entering a feasibility study for that. Parker is still, even under the best terms, a new school would not open until 2030, 2031. So yes, there's a cost associated with this, but we just can't see not putting this in to Parker School for the 5, 6, 7 years that it's still going to be operating, and having the other schools in the district have the secure entry point. So it's certainly a cost, it's certainly an expenditure, but I think it's honestly warranted, just given the status of our buildings, kind of the openness, and trying to have a more secure entry to those schools. The other one here at the high school, it says stairwell renovation for emergency egress. So if you're looking at the high school, if you kind of come into the parking lot, there's a wing that comes right out to the main entrance, and then there's a wing in the back right. The wing in the back right, there's two floors. There's the first and second floor. And there's a door in the wall that actually leads out to the plateau. So when you have, say, a fire alarm, you've got kids from the top floor that come down the stairs, they go right out onto the plateau, and the kids from downstairs actually come out and just go out the side of the building. On the wing on the left, for whatever reason, I can only imagine because it's kind of built on a little bit of a hill, there's no door to exit. So in, say, a fire alarm, you have the kids from the top floor that are coming down, and you also have the kids from the first floor that are coming to the one exit, and it bottlenecks. So this has been noted by, our own Chelmsford Police, Chelmsford Fire, and even when we have a separate security firm that comes in to do assessments of the building for us, they also kind of flagged it as just an egress issue. So what we need to do is construct a door on that wall so it almost kind of matches the other side of the building. It's not quite as simple as doing that because you need the door to get out, but then you also then need to have ADA accessible landings, and you have to have some stairs built in and actually feather it into the walkway. So that's why the cost is a little bit more than you would probably think about just adding a door. But every time we have to do an evacuation of the school, it bottlenecks. So it really is a necessary project for emergency egress from the building. So those are kind of the top tier projects that add up to $877,500. And then we had 4 more kind of nuts and bolts projects. I don't know, Christine, if you want to present these with me,
I can run.
that are related to these others, and then we're happy to talk about and answer questions.
Sure. So the next project that we have, so we're getting into roof replacements, and again, as we look at the next 5 years, we have a lot of roofs to be replaced in town, both on school buildings and town buildings. The center school partial roof replacement, it is a relatively small section of the roof when you look at the whole school. In the picture shown, it's the 2A and 2B, so it's the black roof. It is a pitched asphalt a review of every single roof. They go on the roof. They also take drone video. They note all defects, potentially repairs that we could do for remedial, and they also estimate the remaining years left on the roof. And so when we get down to one or, in a 5-year plan, anything below really 3 to 5 years, but we do have roofs that essentially have 0 to 1 years remaining, so they've reached their end of their useful life. This one is 25 years old, and on that report, it does say that it needs to be replaced, and it did say it last year. It was 1 year left, and so it is deteriorating. Has significant granular loss and deterioration of roof shingles. It's about just over 8,000 square feet. This does not have solar panels on it, and I know we do say that we'll look to see, so as part of this, we will look to see if there's any potential opportunity. We do have it on the rest of the roofing. I also just want to make a note, and it is, I don't know if it was corrected in the version sent out, but it says other costs, solar remove and reset. That's an incorrect amount. I don't know if it is on the version that you have, but the version that I had, and I think I saw, said $300,000. That's an incorrect statement. The overall request for this is $130,000. And that roof track report does provide estimated costs, so we do use that data to help project some of these updated cost information.
Okay, so just make sure that it should be reduced from 430 to 130, because you're saying the 300,000 is not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize. on
Okay,
that.
no, that's important info. I'll get that out to everyone.
In your spreadsheet, correctly.
Okay,
Yeah, because I know we
Okay,
did, I
on-
know
on
we,
the-
Here correctly.
right, because I have, the
We
one I
ta-
have,
yeah, we
right on the
talked-
detail sheet, I have it as 430, but,
yeah, so I remember talking about with you, and
Yeah,
so-
we-
but then I went and looked at this
Yeah.
today, and we
It's
talked about it
correct on the one
too.
I gave you.
right.
Okay. So, perfect. All right. Let's see. So, the next roof project is the McCarthy Middle School partial roof replacement project. This McCarthy school being the oldest school. This was also a request last year as well. I think I believe last year we requested the entire amount, and the portion was funded $250,000. That's enough to advance the design. We are right now putting together the RFP to advance that design. We know this is so again, the roof track report does provide detail of what is it needs to be replaced. It has this section of roof also has leaking. This is above the gyms, the locker room, the kitchen area. So there's a leak history here. We do make repairs, but given the age of the roof, it needs to be replaced. There's nothing that really remedially we can do. It is 36,000 square feet. This section of roof does have solar panels on it. The solar panels are 10 years old. We talked about this last year where we still estimate 10 years remaining on the solar panels. So the proposal is to remove and reset, but we will look at potentially the cost just to remove and replace so that we're putting on a new solar panels on a new roof. It's something to consider, but it's costed out right now as a remove and reset. Let's see, I think that it's really, and this has to be phased construction because of the magnitude of the project. We will have additional requests next year for McCarthy as well, and other schools as well, or in the future years. Do you have
I
anything
was
else?
just gonna say it's a multi-year.
Yeah, multi-year,
Yes, there's
yeah.
more coming.
But this is the section that does have the most leaks.
John,
And
we skipped from 19 to 21, and
Oh.
there's a project 20, but there isn't a detail sheet.
Oh, thank you, yeah,
Or they
thank you,
don't
David,
think-
we don't have we didn't have a detail, 20 is the water heater one.
Oh, yes, we
Yeah.
can talk about that one
Thank you.
too. So the South Row water heater is, so in the 2016 Dorn Witter report, it does identify potential replacements. So in 2016, it wasn't necessarily a need at that point. The water heater was about 4 years old. Water heaters they're they go, you don't really know when they're gonna go. Unfortunately, they just, they give, and so when we see a water heater that gets to be 10 to 12 years old, this being 12 years old, we do want to replace it. So the recommendations in the 2016 report were replacement of the water heater with a more high efficiency unit, and also add a mixing valve. We do, I think, believe that costs, I'm not sure what is carried in it, but I think we were thinking around $60,000.
Yeah, so in the packet I gave you tonight, there is a cut sheet for that. I don't have the number on it, but it is in the packet. So the number that was in my report was in the low 90s. When we looked at that, because we do think that that's a high number, I think the accelerator we put on it from 2016 to bring it to current was just too significant. It also had a lot of extra design work and things like that in it that are just a little bit of overkill. So we're actually just recommending that come down to 60,000. So in the sheet that you have before you tonight, I left it the 90-something thousand because that was the sheet I'd already given the school
Consistent,
committee,
yeah.
and we'd already talked about publicly. But as we looked at the numbers to try to refine that on the cut sheet, or what do you call them, the SIP sheet?
Oh, the project detail sheet, yeah, we
Yeah,
did,
you have it at 60.
Yep.
So that would be when you're putting your report together, I would knock that down to 60 is the request.
okay, and when and again, when I send out the final, the worksheet, I'll note that on there.
Okay.
Yep, to avoid any
Put that
one on
possible
the back.
confusion. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's not listed on this or the,
Right, it
Right,
was in,
but
it should be
It's
in
in the
Dr.
packet.
Lane's,
And, right, it's,
oh, yes,
Links
no,
and
I
the-
have it there. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know for
yeah,
the
we,
your
at the
balance sheet.
time
yeah.
to get this out to the committee,
Okay.
we had talked, all three of us, and we realized that we needed to do further investigation, so we didn't
Oh,
have a
okay.
detailed
Perfect.
sheet on it.
I mean, it's something that, given the age, because I guess the next step would be is we just don't want it to give, and then that's when we find out we have to replace it. And unfortunately, that's what happens a lot to water heaters, so given the age, it is needed.
For us, there's no redundancy. It's a smaller school. It's got one heater. That's what supplies the hot water for the kitchen and the bathrooms and things like that. And anytime they get over 10 years, you just start to get a little nervous.
Yes. All right, so project 22, McCarthy boilers. I apologize if there is no, is there a picture in this version, or I apologize?
I will
if
send
there's
out to,
not,
it, I was gonna display it on the screen tonight until we had,
That's
and then we had the
fine. So,
technical problem, so.
I think you've seen the boilers, the existing boilers. We've had many years, going back a few years, a lot of the boilers have been replaced. We have Airco boilers, and then historically, the new boilers that are going in, we've done Riello, we've had Airco, and also right now, I'm drawing a blank on the new one we just put in, Lac Navarre. So we have 3 different types that we're putting in. We've done the community ed, the Harrington, the high school. So I guess the good news is we're nearing the end of that boiler replacement phase, and McCarthy is next as a request. So there's 4 existing 2 million BTU boilers. They're 18 years old, and they are getting to the point where they are getting to having more repairs needed. So we do want to replace those. I guess the good news is that we've gone through now all these boiler replacement projects, and so I think we're at a good place to. We still would hire a designer, but we would probably be able to expedite that, and potentially that's things knowing that the time to do this is in the summer. So our target would be next summer, as soon as we had the funding available. Any questions?
Can we go back just briefly to all the school safety issues? Can you get all those done in the same year?
Yeah, I think now that we actually have, I mean, we did the high school over actually a series of breaks, so that wasn't too bad. If we're actually able to get these approved, what we would do is actually kind of front the design work on our own end in anticipation that this would get approved at Springtown meeting, and we would actually have the bid package ready to go. These aren't sophisticated builds, and the material is basically drywall and doors and things like that. There's no major lead time for any of the items. The bigger issue is more the tying in all the technology, but we have a very good firm we're working with now that does all of our district-wide security access and things like that. So I definitely do think this is potentially a next year's summer project that it could get done. If you have your contractors on board and everything is lined up, you would be about 2 weeks in a school for the physical build, and then just a lot of work tying everything in. But I do think there's also some room for economy. I don't know exactly what the economy would be. You know, if we end up spending less money on this, we'll give it back and it can be repurposed to another project somewhere else. But I definitely think this is something that we could do, and I'd love to do over next summer.
I agree with you 100%. I just, you
Yeah,
know,
the
definitely you should do
construction
it.
piece isn't too significant, and I think it's an attractive project even for some smaller groups to be able to potentially bid. And you might see 1 or 2 different groups doing, 2 or 3 different projects.
All right, any more questions for Dr. Lane, Director Clancy?
Just on the McCarthy thing, it says the roof is 23 years old at McCarthy. Right?
Sorry.
McCarthy School roof is 23 years old. That's what it says on the,
Yeah, it is 23 years old for MSB eligibility. Oh, sorry, that section, is it 20? I can check right now to confirm that. I have the roof track report. Let's check that.
the project sheet said 23 years old.
I'll check McCarthy right now. So it's it is 22 years old, so in 26 it will be 23 years old. So I just programmed to 26, so it will be 23 years old next year.
No, the reason I ask is, as Jay mentioned earlier, we got funding for schematic design for the South Middle School roof. It's roughly 50%.
Approximately.
So if this is gonna be a $3.5 million roof project, can we like stretch this thing till 25 is the cutoff for funding for roofs this year? We
25
don't know
is
what it'll be in the future.
The minimum, right.
But the point of it, if we could carry this a couple of years, I mean, you're talking
Might qualify.
50% reimbursement for $3.5 million. I don't know the condition of the roof, I haven't seen the roof report, but is that something that we can do, almost like some kind of a patch or some kind of a job to, or is the roof that far gone that it won't last 3 more years or whatever?
So
That's the question, because it's a worthy question of 50% of $3.5 million versus.
It's a good question.
So I guess the only thing there is, so the section we're requesting right now, the oldest, with the solar, that's like the $1.2 million we're looking at last year's funding this year. That is 22 years currently, so it'll be 23 years next year. The request that we're programming in for next year is a 20-year-old roof. So that
And the problem is, the roof that we have now that we're going for is actively leaking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because somebody's gonna ask when they, when we come
this
up
is the
with
bad
all
section.
these projects and roofs.
Yeah, this is- yeah.
At least we now have the answer.
No, it's good to have that detail.
I think so we are moving forward with the design right now, and I think in the design that is part of our, like, how would you phase this? Is there anything, so we're asking the consultant that is part of their design. So if they see a potential way to stretch it, it's just the fact that it's actively leaking and it's, we don't think there's any easy repair to do, or Band-Aid, beyond just going in and fixing a leak as they appear.
It's a legitimate question, because what's gonna be behind it eventually is the high school roof. That's the only other building that's that big, and that's gonna be another $3+ million when we get there. At least we wanna be able to answer people, why, the reaction can be, well, why didn't you get 50% when we got it for South Row, or?
Yeah, the high school, so looking at the 5 years, the high school roof is a 17-year roof, and that's, you're talking a $3 million roof, so. And then Harrington roof is the same age as the high school, and that's Harrington, that's,
The problem is the
yeah.
roofs aren't blasting in conjunction with the state's reimbursement schedule. Maybe that's something the select board and I discussed with the state reps and senators, saying, look, these roofs don't have a useful life of 25 years, but yet you're only allowing funding to replace them on a 25-year basis. Because it does, you can see it does have a material impact on the town's ability. The whole point of the state program is to help communities deal with major issues like roofs and, re-windowing, replacing all the windows on a building, or, that kind of thing. So I think it's interesting to note that you see the disconnect between what the state's able to provide and
Right.
what a community needs.
Well, I'm glad you brought back up the discussion about McCarthy, because at that point, and we were trying to find out what happened to that $300,000 that we were able to remove off the other roof project, and I see there is solar on McCarthy, but yet it doesn't say what the other costs about removing and replacing the solar on this one, where there is solar on it.
Yeah, so I think that's baked into the $1.25 million estimate. So the estimate I have from Roof Track is less than the estimate that's included in your sheet. And so I think it's just, I didn't carry as other costs,
Okay.
but I did include that number.
Okay.
And that's the remove and reset.
I didn't know if that's where that 300 was supposed to belong. and-
That's where it originally was last year. I think what's
Okay.
going to show it this year, because we've now kind of split it into phases, I just carrying it as one total number.
To Paul's point, though, like, when we get together and we talk and we look at these different projects, if a designer ever came up and said, if you wait a year, we could potentially qualify, like, we'd obviously do that, we'd come back and bring that to you. I think the particular section, like in McCarthy that we're talking about now, isn't gonna make the cut to be able to potentially get into the MSBA pipeline. The other thing the MSBA is doing is they're switching from every year to every other year, having the accelerated repair, so we also have to think about that, because if you have to wait 2 years to get in, and then it's basically 2 years by the time you fund, design, and build, you're adding a good amount of time onto the project. Like the South Row Roof project, will be done during the summer of '26. So even though we just got invited in, there's a lot of lead time working with the MSBA, so you certainly get a bang for your buck because you're getting about half back, but it definitely lengthens the time of the project.
Yeah, the other, to be eligible for MSBA, not only is it at least 25 years, but $250,000. So I thought of that too with the center school, because that roof is over 25 years, but it's under $250,000. So again, as part of the study or the design that we'll be having the consultant do, I guess a question is there one, above the gym, is that where it's leaking the most, and maybe that becomes an immediate project, and maybe there is something to push to the MSBA. So that will be part of the immediate scope that we're undertaking.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes all of the look at all the projects under discussion. I did want to mention just a follow-up from last week. So a question arose on the Chelmsford Center for the Arts. That was the painting project and the refinishing of the hardwood floor. So I did have an opportunity to speak with bond counsel. And although the Department of Revenue doesn't issue explicit guidelines on painting, it's bond counsel's opinion that if painting is part of an incidental part of a project, and by that they mean, for example, if you were constructing walls, like we talked about with the school project tonight, and you're constructing walls or repairing sheetrock, and you happen to need to do painting to refinish the surface, that's okay, that's permitted. But if painting is the major scope of the project, then it's not. They did not feel comfortable, borrowing for that. And then on the hardwood floor refinishing, kind of a similar story. If you were replacing damaged boards, replacing the actual hardwood flooring, that would qualify for borrowing purposes. There's also some questions in talking with facilities that because the CCA is such an old building, you can only refinish a hardwood floor so many times because people sometimes have the wrong impression that the hardwood goes all the way down. And reality, there's usually a layer, and every time you sand it and refinish it, you take away a layer. So that needs further study. So just wanted to get back to the committee on that. And then also under, before we get into questions and discussion, Town Accountant
Excuse me,
Darlene.
John, on that point, though, I remember that discussion. I think the other question was the validity of the quote, because I think, to your point, we probably need a legitimate quote.
Right, well,
depending
I
on
would
what
like
work
to
needs
have,
be done.
right, and the instructions that the town manager and I provide to all department heads is that if it's a facilities-related project, it has to go through Director Clancy and her staff. So based on that, I would recommend that we defer that project and do it needs further investigation, but I just wanted to get back to everybody on the borrowing aspect. So next, Town Accountant Darlene Lucia has a summary for us on some recaptured funds from prior year projects.
Yep. So these are all actually facility projects or DPW projects, facility projects, basically, that Christine and her staff looked over the list to see what they had left on these projects. And again, I commend her for doing these projects and coming in under what the actual costs were. So you can see that we had the elementary kitchen upgrade. That was a fiscal 21 project. We had a 22, the other three are the fiscal 22 projects, the Harrington floor replacement. We had OSHA ladder and gates. Actually, you'll see them in these buildings out here. They put some gates and things along the buildings for safety. And then the biomes and Harrington boilers. So those 4 projects, she could recapture the funds that were left over there. So they're just under $30,000, $27,414. So it's not a lot, but it's a little something. We'll take it, right?
Yeah, no, definitely helps.
Great.
So that's good. And we have some recaptured funds. That's good news. Does anyone in the committee want to have questions or discussion about anything we heard?
I do have a question, John.
Sure.
When we were talking initially, we were saying that there are about 6.55 million in requests with a target of 5.8 to 5.9. But if I'm looking at the total on the prioritization sheet that I'm looking at, the total here is 8.1. or just DPW? So it seems like the numbers somewhere are off.
I think that might be a
Is it a typo?
Yeah, just eyeballing
Eyeballing it.
the non-school section, right, the total indicates is 3.99, but
Yeah, that doesn't.
Oh, yeah,
numbers.
that doesn't look right.
the numbers look like it's only 1 point something.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'll double check that when we send out the worksheet, but I would say, you know, for this, for purpose of this, we'll use this for the priority.
Yeah.
It's helpful to have like the department head's priority rankings, and then I'll send everybody a worksheet, and I'll double check the totals of everything.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like, that only adds up to like
Yeah.
1.7.
No, you're exactly right, that doesn't come up to 3.9. Okay,
And same with the one below it.
yep.
I think.
So,
Maybe not, but that one definitely.
So, John, what's the target number again that you're feeling?
well, I would say 5.8 to 5.9 million, similar to last year, that would be, I mean, if we're off a small amount, we can discuss it, but I think that's a good range based, and the limiting factor is really our non-excluded debt service schedule. We've had a number of projects in recent years, so.
Just an observation, right, I think the departments have done a great job, right, in bringing us something that actually feels manageable and not overwhelming. You know, it feels like we ought to be able to get to something reasonable.
Yeah, I agree, David. When I first looked at it, I mean, I think, we were talking last week about prioritizing and that, and I think many of the projects, we've seen, I don't want to shade anyone's, own thoughts on them, but you're right, I think people did a better job prioritizing them and realizing that with funds are limited, and so we're much closer to a target. All right, do we have any more discussion? Do we have anyone that wants to make any public comments? No, not seeing any. I'm sorry, I stepped over the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes from November 14th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any corrections or anything? No? All right, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes from November 14th.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes for November 14th of this year, last week.
Motion by Joe, do we have a second? Second by David?
David's?
I second the motion.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Looks unanimous. All right, so that brings us pretty close to the end. So just wanted a reminder, our next meeting date is Thursday, December 5th. We'll be off next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. Just change the location. We're going to be over at the school committee meeting room at 230 North Road, and it's 1 hour later than this week. It's at 7 p.m. So if anybody has any comments or anything,
And like past
Oh.
years, you'll send. a
Yes,
spreadsheet.
I'll send that worksheet, because I find that helpful. If I get all the members vote on certain projects or indicate their preference, then we can target the ones that people think are questionable. It saves a lot of time, and I think it's worked well. No, that's great. All right, if nobody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn by Chris.
second that.
Second by Joe. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Unanimous, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.